She tried to kill him after he saved her life. Now she needs his touch to stay alive. The gaseous clouds parted as I slipped my salvage vessel through a narrow gap between two massive crystal spires. Each maneuver required absolute precision. One wrong move, and the formations would seriously damage my hull. But I hadn't survived 10 years as a solo salvager without developing steady hands. My scanner pinged, alerting me to an anomalous reading ahead. "Now what have we here?" I muttered, adjusting the proximity sensors for a clearer image. The readings clarified into something exciting: an Astral scout ship, embedded deep in a crystalline formation. Ships from the Astral Dominion almost never ventured this far into neutral space, and intact ones were even rarer. I whistled appreciatively. Payday. Finding salvage was common enough, but Astral tech was the most valuable find in salvaging. Their neural interface systems alone could set me up for a year on a comfortable planet rather than drifting from job to job. I maneuvered my ship closer, anchoring it to a stable rock formation with magnetic clamps. After cycling the airlock and checking my suit's oxygen levels, I stepped out onto the floating terrain. The atmosphere here was thin but not entirely hostile, a swirling mix of hydrogen and exotic gases that created a twilight effect. The crystal formations caught what little light existed, refracting it into colorful patterns across the landscape. I made my way across the rocky terrain, using small bursts from my jetpack to navigate between floating platforms. The Astral ship grew larger as I approached. Its hull was remarkably intact, despite the crash. The craft's biomechanical design was elegant even in its damaged state, flowing curves interrupted only where it had impacted the crystal formation. "Let's see what treasures you're hiding," I said, activating my cutting tool. The outer hull yielded faster than I expected. Astral ships were rumored to have self-healing properties, but this one seemed to have exhausted that capability. I created an opening large enough to slip through and entered cautiously, sweeping my light across the interior. The cockpit was a disaster. What would have been an elegant command center was now a tangle of collapsed support structures and damaged neural interface panels. The ship's internal atmosphere had thinned significantly, though some life support seemed to be functioning on minimal power. My light caught something unexpected: movement among the wreckage. I froze, training my beam toward it. That's when I saw her. An Astral commander pinned beneath a collapsed section of the control panel. The translucent skin of her face and exposed arms changed colors rapidly, flashing between deep red and warning orange. Her neural tendrils, what served astrals instead of hair, writhed with apparent distress. She was alive. Our eyes met, hers lacking pupils, but somehow more expressive than human eyes, with their swirling patterns of silver. Those patterns contracted suddenly, and her hand shot toward what I recognized as a weapons control panel. I lunged forward, catching her wrist. "Wouldn't do that if I were you." "Release me, human," she hissed. Her skin flashed an angry crimson. "You activate whatever weapons you've got left. We both die in this crystal death trap," I said, not letting go. "Your breathing apparatus is damaged. I can see the cracked filter from here." Her free hand moved to her throat, where an intricate device that allowed astrals to process oxygen-rich atmospheres was indeed visibly damaged. Her skin color changed to a sickly yellow-green. I made a quick decision. An Astral commander would be valuable, alive or dead, but alive opened up more possibilities. "I can help you, but you need to stop trying to kill me for 2 minutes." Her silver eyes narrowed, but the colors in her skin steadied somewhat. I released her wrist cautiously, ready to dodge if she tried anything else. "Your atmospheric converter is losing pressure," I said, pulling my toolkit from my belt. "I've got parts that might work as a temporary fix. Why would you help me?" Her voice was weaker now. I shrugged, already sorting through components. "Same reason I'm on this moon. Salvage. And you're worth more breathing than not." She attempted to move, then winced as the debris moved around her. "You intend to sell me." "I intend to profit from this situation," I corrected, finding the adapter I needed. "How that happens is flexible." I worked quickly, modifying a filtration component to interface with her damaged apparatus. Astrals breathed something similar to oxygen, but needed it processed differently than humans did. The physiology wasn't my specialty, but the mechanics I understood. She tried to push my hands away twice more, each attempt weaker than the last. Her skin had faded to an alarming pale blue. "Hold still," I ordered. "I'm almost finished." I connected the last component and sealed it with bonding gel. The makeshift repair wasn't pretty, but it would stabilize her atmosphere intake. Sure enough, after a few moments, her skin began to change to a deeper blue, not healthy, but no longer critical. "There, that should buy you some time." She looked at me with new intensity. "Why waste resources on an enemy?" "Enemy? I'm just a salvager. Your war with the collective isn't my problem." I glanced around the cockpit, assessing the situation. "Your ship, however, is dead. Life support's running on emergency power, and that won't last more than a few hours." I started examining the debris pinning her down. "I can cut you out of there, but it'll cost you." Her skin flashed with what I'd come to recognize as suspicion. "What payment could I possibly offer that you couldn't simply take once I'm dead?" "Information," I said simply. "Safe passage through astral territory, or credits transferred to an anonymous account. I'm not picky." The ship's remaining systems chose that moment to flicker, plunging us into darkness for 3 seconds before emergency lighting kicked in. Her expression changed, resignation replacing hostility. "I require extraction," she admitted. "Finally, my mission parameters have been compromised." "That's the spirit." I fired up my cutting tool again. "Now don't move. This gets tricky." I worked methodically, cutting through the wreckage piece by piece. She remained perfectly still, only the changing colors of her skin revealing her pain. As I removed the last section pinning her legs, proximity alarms sounded from my suit. "Shit," I muttered, checking the readout. "We've got company. Collective patrol vessels, 3 of them, closing fast." Her eyes widened. "They cannot find me here." "They won't," I said, making another quick decision. "Because we're leaving. Can you walk?" She struggled to her feet, swaying slightly. "I am operational." "Great. Operational is good." I looped her arm over my shoulder despite her obvious reluctance. "My ship's docked 100 meters east. We need to move now." We made our way out through the breach I'd created, stepping back onto the rocky terrain. The moon's low gravity helped, but the astral commander was still unsteady. I activated my jetpack at low power, using it to assist our movement between platforms. "I am Commander Nixala of the Astral Dominion," she said suddenly, as we neared my ship, 7th Intelligence Division. I nearly missed my footing on the next platform. Intelligence Division. No wonder she was so concerned about the collective finding her. "Rook Mercer," I replied, helping her across the final gap. "Independent salvage operator." "You should know, Rook Mercer," she continued, as I opened my ship's external hatch, "that my reconnaissance mission gathered classified intelligence on collective weapons development. If they capture me, both our peoples face grave consequences." I got her inside and sealed the hatch behind us. The implications of what she'd just revealed hit me as I rushed to the cockpit. I hadn't just rescued any astral. I'd stumbled upon a high-ranking intelligence officer with information valuable enough to restart the war that had simmered into cold hostility for the past decade. "Strap in," I called back to her as I dropped into the pilot's seat. "This is going to get interesting." The ship's engines roared to life as I disengaged the magnetic clamps. Through the view screen I could see the approaching collective vessels against the swirling gases of the moon's atmosphere. I'd come looking for valuable salvage, and instead found something far more dangerous. The collective vessels grew larger on my view screen as they moved through the moon's atmosphere. I jammed the thrusters to maximum output, feeling my ship shudder as we shot upward. "Hold tight back there," I called to Nixala. The first warning shot streaked past our port side and dispersed into the atmospheric gases. I banked hard right, diving toward a massive electromagnetic stormfront full of dangerous energy. The proximity alarms screamed in protest. "Are you trying to kill us?" Nixala's voice was strained, barely audible over the ship's groaning hull. "Trying not to," I muttered, pushing the controls further. Those storm fronts scramble targeting systems. I guided my vessel into the upper boundary of the storm, where forked energy discharges crackled around us. The shields flared blue with each impact, power levels fluctuating wildly. This close to the storm, the collective ships wouldn't risk following. Their military-grade systems were too sensitive to electromagnetic disturbance. A quick glance at the secondary monitor showed Nixala's vital signs fluctuating. The makeshift repair to her breathing apparatus was holding, but just barely. The neural toxicity readings were reaching dangerous levels. "How's that breathing apparatus working?" I asked, splitting my attention between piloting and monitoring. No response came from the cargo area. I'd hastily converted into a medical bay before our departure. The silence sent a chill down my spine. "Commander Nixala." The ship lurched as we hit a gravitational eddy in this region of space. I compensated quickly, but the sudden movement caused loose items to clatter across the deck. Another warning shot from the collective ships. This one closer rattled the hull. They were getting bolder, edging closer to the storm. I needed to make a move. "Screw this," I said, diving the ship directly into a dense particle cloud that billowed beneath us. Visibility dropped to 0 instantly. My navigation systems sputtered and died as expected, but the collective ships would be equally blind. I activated the manual gyroscope and began counting silently. 20 seconds at this velocity would put us through the cloud. Any longer and we'd risk structural damage from the abrasive particles. With no response from Nixala and the ship flying blind, I engaged the autopilot to maintain our current heading and unbuckled from my seat. "Keep us steady, Vera," I instructed the ship's rudimentary AI system. I made my way back to the cargo hold, bracing against the walls as the ship continued to shudder. The converted space was sparsely equipped, a medical cot bolted to the floor, atmosphere regulators running loudly, and monitoring equipment. Nixala lay on the cot, her translucent skin cycling between a sickly yellow and pale blue. Her neural tendrils writhed weakly, a sign of distress. But it wasn't her condition that made me freeze mid-step. Her arm was extended toward my ship's access panel, fingers splayed across the communication array controls. "What are you doing?" I demanded. Her eyes snapped to me, the swirling silver patterns contracting sharply. "Ensuring survival." "By what?" "Calling for help." I crossed the small space in 2 strides, pulling her hand away from the panel. "You broadcast any signal from this position, you might as well paint a target on both our backs. My people need to know." She tried to sit up then gasped as her neural tendrils spasmed violently. The argument died on my lips as she collapsed back onto the cot, her skin flashing alarming shades of gray and dark purple. "Shit." I grabbed the medical scanner, passing it over her trembling body. The readings confirmed what I feared. The neural toxicity had progressed, affecting her central nervous system. I rummaged through my limited medical supplies, cursing my lack of knowledge about astral physiology. The universal antitoxin might work, but at what dosage? Too much could kill her, too little would be useless. Her breathing became shallow, each intake labored through the damaged apparatus. I made a quick decision, filling the injector with half the standard human dose. "This might help, or it might make things worse," I warned, pressing the injector against her neck where the skin looked thinnest. "But doing nothing definitely ends badly." I depressed the plunger, watching anxiously as the antitoxin entered her system. For several agonizing seconds, nothing happened. Then her skin began to stabilize, the erratic color changes slowing to a steady pale blue. The ship suddenly emerged from the particle cloud, the abrupt return of visibility causing the view screen to compensate with a flash. The vastness of the Vortex Nebula spread before us, its swirling colors and scattered star systems caught my attention for a moment. "They're still pursuing," Nixala said weakly, her eyes fixed on the scanner readings. I returned to the cockpit, confirming her assessment. The collective ships had emerged from the cloud, but at a greater distance than I'd hoped. They'd reacquired our position but hadn't resumed firing, likely reassessing their strategy. "Why are they so determined to find you?" I asked, plotting an evasive course through the nebula's outer reach. "What intelligence did you gather that's worth this kind of pursuit?" She struggled to sit up, her movements careful and measured. I discovered evidence of experimental weapons development. The collective has obtained Astral neural technology. They're developing weapons that could control my people's neural functions. I immediately understood how serious this was. Such weapons would be devastating against the Astral population, whose neural tendrils were central to their sensory and telepathic abilities. Under normal circumstances, I could defend myself, she continued, frustration evident in her voice. But the toxicity has temporarily disabled my telepathic abilities. I'm vulnerable. The last word seemed to cost her, her pride visibly wounded by the admission. I checked our fuel reserves, then the damage reports from our escape through the storm and particle cloud. We wouldn't make it to any astral territory in this condition. And collective space was obviously out of the question. We need repairs, supplies, and proper medical treatment for you, I said, making my decision. I'm setting course for Crossroads Station. Crossroads. Alarm flashed across her features, her skin momentarily pulsing red. That lawless trading post. That neutral trading post. I corrected, programming the coordinates. The only port in this sector where an astral won't be immediately captured or killed. And where I have contacts who won't ask too many questions. She clearly wanted to argue but seemed to recognize the logic. With a resigned nod, she settled back onto the cot. I activated the long-range thrusters, directing us toward the distant station. The collective ships continued their pursuit, but at a maintaining distance. They knew where we were headed now. We had maybe 3 days until we reached Crossroads Station. 3 days to figure out how to smuggle an Astral intelligence officer past some of the most notorious bounty hunters in the sector. 3 days to repair her breathing apparatus properly. 3 days to decide whether I was going to profit from this situation or get myself killed trying to do the right thing. I glanced back at Nixala, who looked at me with those strange silver eyes. Get some rest, Commander, I said, turning back to the controls. Something tells me we'll both need it. Crossroads Station appeared ahead in my view screen. The outer ring's lights flickered through the nebula gases. That's your plan. Smuggling me in a cargo container. Nixala stood behind my pilot's chair, her skin cycling between blue and violet. The antitoxin had stabilized her condition over our 3-day journey, but she remained weaker than she'd admit. Unless you want to stroll through customs as an Astral intelligence officer in collective-controlled space. She pressed her lips together, the neural tendrils at her scalp undulating gently. A sign I'd come to recognize as reluctant agreement. The container has been modified with atmosphere regulators, I said, keying in our approach vector. You'll be uncomfortable, not dead. Comforting, she muttered. I guided my ship toward the lower docks, the poorly monitored section where station authorities asked fewer questions if you paid the right bribes. Docking clamps secured us to the station with a shuddering jolt. I handed Nixala a breather mask I'd modified to better support her physiology. This should help filter the station atmosphere. It's designed for human needs, not astral. She examined it with obvious skepticism but secured it over her face. Her slender fingers adjusted the settings, moving with surprising dexterity for someone still recovering. Your neural toxicity levels, I asked. Manageable. The telepathic abilities remain limited. The admission clearly bothered her. I led her to the cargo bay where an oblong container waited, its interior padded and equipped with the atmosphere regulators I'd promised. Customs scan lasts 15 seconds. After that, we're in the clear. She climbed in with more grace than the confined space deserved. If you abandon me in this container, Rook Mercer, I will hunt you across 17 star systems. Noted. I sealed the container. The customs process went smoother than expected. A bored sectoid official with 3 eyes barely glanced at my salvager credentials before waving me through. The scanner passed over my specialized equipment container without alarm thanks to the signal dampeners I'd installed. Once inside the main concourse, I wheeled the container through crowded thoroughfares. Crossroads Station lived up to its name, a mix of species from across the galactic arm. Towering insectoid mantids bartered with squat graven merchants. Human colonists mingled with blue-skinned Azurians. In this chaos, we were just another forgettable face and suspicious package. I ducked into a maintenance corridor, checking for surveillance before releasing the container's locks. Nixala emerged, her skin pale but stable. "Welcome to Crossroads," I said. "Try not to look too military." She straightened her posture immediately. "I don't look military. You're standing at attention in a maintenance corridor." She made a visible effort to slouch, resulting in perhaps the most awkward stance I'd ever witnessed. I sighed and handed her a worn station jacket I'd brought along. "Just put this on. And try not to glow too much." The medical district occupied a former passenger liner welded to the station's midsection. The corridor walls were lined with clinics ranging from legitimate medical facilities to black market augmentation shops. I steered us toward a narrow doorway marked with faded Vexillian script and a universal medical symbol. "Your contact is a Vexillian?" Nixala asked skeptically. "Dexarol Van, best neural specialist in 3 sectors. Also the least likely to report an astral patient to station authorities." I rapped a specific pattern on the metal door. A scanner extended, sweeping over my face before retracting. The door slid open with a pneumatic hiss. The clinic's reception area smelled of antiseptic and something vaguely metallic. Dex emerged from a back room, all 6 arms moving independently. 2 sorting medical instruments. 1 adjusting a monitor, another holding a datapad, and 2 gesturing irritably. "Mercer, your timing is atrocious as usual." The Vexillian's 4 multifaceted eyes focused on us, then narrowed at the sight of Nixala. "You brought an Astral to my clinic. Are you mentally deficient?" "Good to see you too, Dex." The Vexillian's mandibles clicked rapidly, their equivalent of an exasperated sigh. "Inside, quickly." We followed them into a back examination room cluttered with medical equipment both standard and modified. Dex immediately began scanning Nixala with 3 different devices simultaneously. Neural toxicity, respiratory system damage, unusual patterns of cellular stress. 3 of Dex's arms reached for different cabinets. Fascinating case. Terrible patient to have in my clinic during increased collective patrols. Nixala tensed. "The collective is here. In force, 3 patrol vessels docked yesterday," Dex confirmed. "Unusual activity for this sector. They claim routine inspection, but their soldiers are questioning merchants about recent arrivals." I exchanged a glance with Nixala. "They tracked us." "Not necessarily," she said. "They could be following standard search protocols." "Lie down," Dex instructed Nixala, pointing to an examination table with 2 arms while the others prepared equipment. "The neural pathway damage requires immediate attention if you want to regain telepathic function." While Dex began treatment, I slipped out to the clinic's front room and activated my communicator, punching in a frequency used by my black market contacts. If we needed specialized components for Nixala's breathing apparatus, Crossroads Station was the place to find them, assuming we had enough credits or tradable goods. A known voice answered. "Mercer, heard you made port. What kind of trouble are you in now?" "Just looking for specialized atmospheric components, Lena. Astral compatible." A low whistle came through the communicator. "Expensive ask. Meet at Vargas. 1 hour. Bring credits." I returned to find Nixala connected to several monitoring devices, her neural tendrils extended into a specialized interface. Dex worked with mechanical precision, adjusting settings with multiple hands. "Your Astral has significant neural pathway disruption," they reported without looking up. "Repairing the connections is possible but requires time. Her breathing apparatus needs complete replacement. My temporary fix will only last days, not weeks." "She's not my Astral," I corrected. "I am not his anything," Nixala added, her silver eyes narrowing. Dex's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement. "Irrelevant semantics. Treatment continues." "You owe me already, Mercer." I checked the time display. "I need to meet a contact about those components. Will you be all right here?" Nixala gave me a cold look. "I survived hostile enemy territory for months. I can manage a medical clinic for an hour. Don't kill my doctor. I still need them." I headed for the door. "Mercer," Nixala called after me, "we need to discuss our next move when you return." I nodded and slipped out, navigating through the station's winding corridors toward the trading district. Vargas was a dimly lit establishment that served as neutral ground for negotiations too sensitive for public spaces. I spotted Lena at a corner table, her cybernetic eye glowing faintly in the darkness. "Those components you're after," she said, as I sat down. "They're military grade, recent embargoes driven prices up. How much? More than you've got." She slid a datapad across the table. "Unless you've something valuable to trade." I examined the figures and winced. She wasn't wrong. "I've got collective design circuit modules. Clean, untraceable." Her interest visibly peaked. "How many?" The negotiations took 40 minutes, but I secured the components enough to properly repair Nixala's breathing apparatus with Dex's help. I returned to the clinic with the package secured inside my jacket. I found Nixala sitting upright, disconnected from the treatment equipment. Her skin showed healthier colors, changing between deep blue and occasional flashes of violet. "Your timing is terrible," she stated flatly. "We need to leave, now." What happened? Dex emerged from a storage area, packing medical supplies into a portable kit. "Station-wide security alert. Collective forces conducting section-by-section searches. They claim to be looking for smuggled weapons, but the pattern suggests they're tracking specific individuals." "Us," I clarified. "Obviously," Dex retorted. "Treatment is incomplete. But she can function. I've stabilized the major neural pathways and modified her breathing apparatus temporarily." I handed the components to Dex. "Can you finish the repairs with these?" Their multiple eyes widened. Military-grade Astral components. Definitely illegal. Definitely useful. 4 arms began working immediately, integrating the parts into Nixala's breathing device. "Where do we go?" I asked. Turning to Nixala, "The lower docks will be crawling with collective security by now. We need information," she said firmly, "and I know where to find it." 15 minutes later, with Nixala's breathing apparatus upgraded and secured, we stood in the clinic's back room arguing over our options. "The diplomatic sector is the most heavily secured area of the station," I pointed out. "We can't just walk in. We won't need to." Her skin flashed with determination. "Every Astral diplomatic facility maintains secure communication systems that operate on military encryption. My access codes should still function." "Access codes from a damaged scout ship, that's your plan?" "My neural connection to our systems isn't dependent on the physical state of my vessel," she explained, with obvious impatience. "The codes are biometrically linked to my neural patterns." Before I could respond, Dex burst into the room. "Collective forces entering the medical district, 2 corridors away and moving systematically. You need to leave." I grabbed our remaining supplies. "We'll use the service tunnels. Back exit." Dex pointed to a narrow hatch partially hidden behind storage containers. "Emerges near central lifts. You owe me for this, Mercer." Significantly, "Add it to my tab." We slipped into the maintenance tunnel, a cramped passage lit by sporadic emergency lighting. The station's infrastructure buzzed around us as we navigated through the network of service corridors, avoiding the main thoroughfares where collective forces would be conducting their searches. "These tunnels run throughout the station?" Nixala asked, her voice repeating slightly in the confined space. "Maintenance crews need access everywhere. Most stations are more tunnel than actual structure." We emerged near the central transportation hub, blending into the crowd of travelers and station residents. Public announcement systems periodically broadcasted security advisories about the collective presence, urging cooperation. Nixala pulled me toward a less crowded corridor. "The diplomatic sector is 3 levels up. There will be security checkpoints, which we can't pass," I reminded her. "I don't intend to use the main entrance." She gestured toward an information terminal. "Can you access the station schematics?" I approached the terminal, fingers flying across the interface as I bypassed the public access restrictions. "What am I looking for?" "Emergency evacuation routes. Diplomatic facilities always connect to secondary systems in case of station failure." I found the schematics, highlighting the emergency access points. "There." Environmental control junction connects to the diplomatic level for atmosphere regulation. Tight squeeze, but we could make it. We reached the junction access point 20 minutes later, after navigating through increasingly secure sections of the station. I overrode the maintenance lock, revealing a narrow vertical shaft filled with atmosphere regulation equipment. Up there, I said, pointing to a service hatch 3 meters above, should open into the lower diplomatic sector. The climb was awkward, particularly for Nix Allah, whose recovering strength wasn't at full capacity. I pushed open the hatch and helped her through, emerging into a dimly lit corridor with ornate wall panels, a stark contrast to the utilitarian design of the rest of the station. Emergency lighting only, Nix Allah observed. This section has been powered down, abandoned when hostilities increased. She nodded. The Astral Dominion would have withdrawn diplomatic personnel during the last conflict escalation. We moved cautiously through the corridor until reaching a sealed doorway marked with Astral script. Nix Allah placed her palm against the security panel, her neural tendrils extending slightly as she interfaced with the system. For a moment nothing happened, then the panel glowed with faint blue light and the door slid open. "Your access codes still work," I said, surprised. "I told you they would." There was no mistaking the pride in her voice. The consulate interior was preserved in a state of suspended activity, as if the staff had expected to return shortly. Workstations stood powered down but intact, diplomatic seals and documentation still in place. Nix Allah moved directly to a central terminal. "This is what we need, the secure communication array." As she activated the system, her neural tendrils extended further, connecting directly with the interface in a way I'd only heard about but never witnessed. The site was somehow intimate. A physical manifestation of the astral neural connection technology. "What exactly are we looking for?" I asked, keeping watch on the corridor. "Intelligence reports. Anything related to collective biotech research." My mission wasn't isolated. Other operatives would have been gathering related data. Minutes passed as she searched through encrypted files, her face occasionally tensing with concentration. Finally she stepped back from the terminal, her expression grave. "There it is. Confirmation of everything I discovered." She gestured to the screen where complex schematics rotated alongside dense text in Astral script. "The collective has obtained Astral neural interface technology. They're integrating it with their mechanical systems to create weapons that could control our neural functions." I studied the schematics, recognizing elements of both technologies. This isn't just dangerous for astrals. These interfaces could be reversed to affect human neural systems too. It's a weapon that threatens both our species. Exactly. Her skin flashed with urgency. The technology merges collective mechanical engineering with astral neural interfaces. Whoever controls this could essentially enslave either population. But who would? The realization hit me. A third party. Someone playing both sides. She nodded. Corporate interests that profit from continued conflict. If either government had developed this independently, they would have used it already. I downloaded the files to my personal data device. "So we've got evidence of a conspiracy that threatens both our peoples. Now what?" "We need to reach my superiors with this information," she said. "And warn your government as well." Before I could respond, a security alert blared through the diplomatic sector. Red emergency lights flashed in the corridor outside. "Breach detected in diplomatic sector 14. All security personnel respond." "They found us," I said, checking the exits. "How did they track us here?" "The power activation when I accessed the terminal." Nix Allah disconnected from the system. In an abandoned sector it would have triggered automated alerts. Heavy footsteps repeated down the corridor. I moved to the back of the consulate, searching for another exit. There has to be a secondary evacuation route. Nix Allah joined me, scanning the walls. "There," she pointed to a subtle seam in the paneling. "Emergency exit to the station's upper ring." I pried open the panel, revealing a narrow maintenance ladder. "Ladies first. In a tactical retreat the superior officer goes last." she countered, pushing me toward the opening. This isn't a military operation, I reminded her, but climbed in anyway. We ascended rapidly as sounds of collective agents breaching the consulate echoed below. The ladder led to an access hatch that opened into the upper ring of the station, a section primarily occupied by luxury accommodations and high-end commercial establishments. We emerged in a storage area, quickly shutting the hatch behind us. The space was filled with expensive furnishings and decorative items. We need to blend in, I said, glancing around. This level will be crawling with security soon. Nixala spotted a rack of formal attire intended for the establishment's staff. These might help. Minutes later, we walked confidently through the main promenade of the upper ring. Dressed as service staff of one of the luxury establishments, I carried a selection of expensive liquors on a tray, while Nixala managed to look imperious even in server's clothing. Security checkpoint ahead, I muttered as we approached an intersection where collective officers were checking identification. Follow my lead, she whispered. With perfect military precision disguised as server efficiency, she guided us through a service entrance to an adjacent restaurant. Kitchen access to the secondary promenade, I realized, recognizing the layout from previous visits to the station. Smart, basic tactical maneuvering, she replied, but couldn't completely hide the pleased flicker of gold in her skin. We navigated through 3 more service areas, each time evading security checkpoints through Nixala's tactical planning and my knowledge of the station's layout. Our partnership was developing an unexpected rhythm, her strategic mind complementing my practical experience. We need to reach the private docking bays, I said as we entered a quieter section of the upper ring. My contacts can arrange transport off-station. The evidence must reach both governments, she insisted. This conspiracy affects everyone. I nodded, surprising myself with my agreement. A week ago, I would have been looking for the highest bidder for this information. Now I was considering the greater implications. Private bays are this way, I said, gesturing toward a restricted corridor. I know a security officer who owes me a favor. As we moved toward our potential escape route, I glanced at Nixala. Her skin had stabilized to a healthy blue with occasional ripples of violet. Despite everything, she moved with confidence and purpose. Our unlikely alliance had changed into something more substantial, a partnership built on shared danger and growing respect. The conspiracy we'd uncovered was bigger than either of our peoples. Whatever came next, we would face it together. My hands gripped the manual control column as another gravity wave rocked the ship. The Vortex Nebula's inner region was infamous for spatial distortions that rendered automated navigation systems useless. Outside the view screen, swirling gases painted purple and blue patterns against the darkness, beautiful and deadly in equal measure. Incoming flux wave 30 degrees port, Nixala said from the co-pilot's seat. Her eyes were half closed, neural tendrils extended and gently pulsing as she sensed the gravitational shifts around us. Significant displacement potential. I banked the ship hard starboard, narrowly avoiding the invisible distortion that would have torn through our shields like paper. Anything else trying to kill us, I should know about. The entire region is trying to kill us, she replied, dryly. That's rather the point of hiding a secret research facility here. Since our escape from Crossroads Station, we'd followed the coordinates embedded in the files we'd stolen. The evidence pointed to a hidden facility where the neural interface weapons were being developed, the key to the conspiracy threatening both our peoples. How's the neural connection holding? I asked, noting the slight tremor in her extended tendrils. She opened her eyes, the swirling silver patterns contracting as she returned her focus to the cabin. Functional but limited. The damage from the toxicity requires more time to fully heal. A flicker of frustration colored her skin briefly red before returning to its healthy blue. I should be capable of much greater range. You're doing fine, I said, adjusting our course through a relatively stable channel in the nebula. We're still alive, which is more than most pilots could manage in this region. Her skin rippled with what I'd come to recognize as her version of reluctant appreciation, violet waves against the blue base. The color changes had become more nuanced as her condition improved, displaying subtle emotional variations that I was slowly learning to read. Your modifications to the breathing apparatus have improved efficiency by 22%, she noted. The Vixilian's neural restoration treatment was also surprisingly effective. Dex may be abrasive, but they're the best neural specialist in 3 sectors, also now significantly richer thanks to us. Your contact network is impressive for a salvager. I smirked. Just a salvager? Is that what you still think I am? You are clearly more, she admitted, though determining exactly what remains challenging. The ship's sensors pinged, alerting us to a narrowing passage ahead. I focused on navigating the treacherous corridor of stable space while Nixala monitored the gravitational fluctuations. We'd fallen into an effective working rhythm over the past week, her tactical mind complementing my piloting skills. The forced proximity had created an unexpected partnership that actually worked. Tell me about the weapons facility, I said, breaking a comfortable silence that had settled between us. What should we expect? Based on the intelligence files, it's operated by a shell corporation with ties to both collective military contractors and Astral technology firms. She called up the schematics on her console. Likely a corporate research site retrofitted for weapons development. Security? Significant, she answered. Automated defense systems, private military contractors, limited access points. The facility is designed to appear as a standard mining operation to external scans. I nodded. Like most of the operations in this sector. Perfect cover. We lapsed into silence again as I navigated a particularly dense section of the nebula. After a while, curiosity got the better of me. Why did you join intelligence work? I asked. Most Astrals I've encountered were scientists or diplomats. She considered the question for longer than I expected. My family has a long tradition of government service. Military operations offered the clearest path to meaningful contribution. Family expectations then. Her skin darkened slightly. Not entirely. I chose military service over diplomatic corps, which was unexpected. My family has deeper connections to diplomatic traditions. They didn't approve, they adapted, she said dismissively. What of you? Salvagers rarely operate alone. Most join collectives for protection and resource sharing. I focused on adjusting our course, buying time to decide how much to share. I prefer independence. Collectives have too many rules, too many people making decisions by committee. That doesn't explain your knowledge of ship modifications or security systems, she pressed. Or your proficiency with collective military protocols. I felt her watching me, but kept my eyes on the navigation controls. Let's just say I had a different career before salvaging. With the collective military. Something like that. She seemed about to pursue the question further when the ship shuddered violently. Warning lights flashed across the control panel. Environmental system failure in Section 3, I announced, checking the diagnostic readout. Atmospheric regulators in the secondary cabin are offline. My quarters, Nixala observed. How long for repairs? I ran a quick system check. Main control relay is fried. We'd need to dock for proper repairs. I can reroute life support from other sections as a temporary measure, but your quarters will be uninhabitable until we can replace the components. She digested this information with typical Astral practicality. I require functioning atmospheric conditions for rest cycles. Where do you suggest I relocate? Ship's not exactly spacious. You'll have to use my cabin. I can bunk in the cargo hold. Unnecessary, she said. The cabin is sufficient for shared occupancy during alternating rest cycles. I raised an eyebrow. You sure about that? Human and astral atmospheric preferences don't exactly align. Your modifications to my breathing apparatus allow for greater tolerance of oxygen-rich environments. Additionally, the main cabin's atmospheric controls can be adjusted to a mutually tolerable setting. Practical as always, I said, unable to suppress a slight smile. Efficiency is practical, she replied. But I caught a faint golden ripple across her skin, amusement perhaps, or something more complex. Several hours later, I finalized the atmospheric adjustments in my cabin. The air was now a compromise between human and astral preferences, slightly thinner than I would choose but richer than Nixala would normally tolerate. The lighting was dimmed to accommodate her light sensitivity. "Temperature regulation complete," I announced, as she entered with her few personal items. A balmy 18 degrees, not ideal for either of us, but survivable. She surveyed the small cabin with an evaluative look. My salvager lifestyle didn't allow for many personal possessions, but the few I had were now awkwardly organized to create space for her. "This will be adequate," she declared, placing a small container of personal items beside my bunk. She paused at a small metal object on my shelf, an old-style mechanical compass I'd carried for years as a reminder of Earth. "Navigation technology from pre-space human history?" she asked, examining it without touching. "Something like that. Family heirloom." I cleared my throat. "Bathroom facility is through there. I've adjusted the water reclamation system to accommodate your physiology. Your consideration is unexpected but appreciated." She sat on the edge of the bunk, her posture still military straight despite her fatigue. The neural connection during navigation had clearly drained her more than she would admit. "Get some rest," I said. "I'll wake you when we're approaching the facility perimeter." "You require rest as well," she pointed out. "You've been piloting for 17 continuous hours." I shrugged. "I'll survive. An efficient, maximum operational capacity requires adequate rest cycles." Her tone was matter-of-fact, but I detected concern beneath the practicality. "I'll set the autopilot through the next stable section," I conceded. "Happy?" Her skin briefly flashed gold. "Satisfied with your rational decision." 6 hours later, I woke her as promised. The ship had made good progress through the nebula, and long-range sensors had detected the crystalline asteroid field that matched our target coordinates. "Multiple structures embedded within the largest asteroids," I reported as she joined me in the cockpit, looking remarkably composed after her rest cycle. Consistent with the facility description from the files, she studied the sensor readings. Significant electromagnetic shielding. They're disguising energy signatures to appear as standard mining operations. Typical corporate security. Nothing says nothing to see here's like excessive camouflage. I brought up the access codes we'd extracted from the intelligence files. These should get us through the outer security perimeter under the guise of a supply delivery. And if they don't, then we improvise. I flashed her a grin that she didn't return. "Come on, Commander. A little optimism wouldn't kill you. Realistic assessment improves survival odds," she countered. But her skin rippled with faint golden patterns that betrayed her growing comfort with my humor. We approached the asteroid field carefully, transmitting the supply authorization codes at the specified intervals. After tense minutes of scrutiny, the automated security systems cleared us for approach to Docking Bay 7. "Now for the difficult part," Nixala said as the massive facility came into view. A sprawling complex built into and around a crystalline asteroid the size of a small moon. Infiltrating a high-security weapons research facility operated by a shadow corporation trying to start an interstellar war. I guided the ship toward the designated docking port. Just another Tuesday. Her neural tendrils twitched with what might have been exasperation. "Your species' reliance on humor during critical situations remains baffling. Your species' inability to crack a smile remains concerning," I countered. "But your skin gave you away. That was definitely amusement. Focus on the mission, Rook." We docked without incident, the facility's automated systems extending magnetic clamps to secure my ship. The docking bay was industrial and anonymous, designed for utility rather than aesthetics. Perfect for our purposes. I handed Nixala the modified supply officer credentials we'd prepared. "Remember, we're delivering specialized atmospheric regulators for Laboratory Section 5. We have clearance for standard delivery protocols, nothing more. And once inside, we find a maintenance access point, split up to cover more ground. You access the central database as planned. I'll handle security systems." I checked the small concealed weapon at my hip. "Emergency extraction point is Docking Bay 3, if something goes wrong." She nodded, her expression shifting to focused determination as her skin stabilized to a steady blue. For all her alien features, I recognized the look of a soldier preparing for combat. The facility security checkpoint was our first hurdle. Two bored-looking guards in corporate security uniforms scanned our credentials with minimal interest. Our forged delivery documents passed inspection, and we were directed to processing where automated systems would assign delivery routes. "Stay casual," I murmured as we walked through sterile corridors. Most of these facilities operate with rotating contractor staff. No one knows everyone. "Understood." Nixala adjusted her posture slightly, adopting a less military bearing. We located a maintenance junction in a quiet service corridor. The access panel yielded to my specialized decryption tools, revealing a network of service tunnels that ran throughout the facility. "The central data core should be located 2 levels down," Nixala said, consulting the schematic we'd memorized. "Security controls will be adjacent to main engineering. I'll head there first, disable the internal sensors. Give you 20 minutes to reach the data core before I start the disruption." I handed her a small communication device. "Secure channel, short range only. Use it when you've accessed the files we need." She took the device, her fingers briefly touching mine. "Exercise caution, Rook. These are not typical corporate guards." "Worried about me, Commander?" I asked with a half-smile. "Concerned about mission integrity," she corrected, but her skin betrayed her with a brief purple flash. We separated at the next junction, Nixala moving silently toward the facility's central sections while I made my way toward engineering. The service tunnels were utilitarian and poorly monitored, standard corporate oversight neglecting the less visible infrastructure. I navigated through 3 security checkpoints using maintenance worker credentials, eventually reaching the lower engineering sections. The security control center was located in a separate room adjacent to the main power regulation systems, standard corporate design prioritizing function over security. Accessing the control center required timing and a small electromagnetic pulse device I'd prepared specifically for this purpose. When a technician exited for a routine inspection, I triggered the device, temporarily disabling the door's electronic lock. I slipped inside before the backup systems engaged. The security control room was unoccupied, another corporate efficiency decision. Most monitoring was automated, with personnel responding to alerts rather than actively watching feeds. Perfect for my purposes. I worked quickly, bypassing security protocols and installing a programmed disruption sequence in the surveillance system. When activated, it would create a cascading failure in the sensor network, providing Nixala with approximately 15 minutes of unrestricted access to the data core. With the primary objective complete, I took the opportunity to access a nearby terminal, searching for technical specifications on the weapons being developed. The files were heavily encrypted, but my decryption algorithms slowly revealed fragments of information, enough to confirm our suspicions about neural interface weapons. As the decryption progressed, an unexpected file classification caught my attention: atmospheric regulation technology. I accessed the folder, curiosity driving me despite the mission parameters. The files contained schematics for advanced breathing apparatus designs, specifically engineered for astral physiology in oxygen-rich environments. The technology was far more sophisticated than the modifications I'd made to Nixala's current device, a permanent solution rather than the temporary fixes we'd been implementing. I downloaded the schematics to my portable device, considering the implications. With these designs, I could potentially create a breathing apparatus that would allow Nixala to function in human environments indefinitely, without the limitations of her current equipment. I hesitated before encrypting the files. Our mission had a defined purpose: gather evidence of the conspiracy and escape. Personal considerations shouldn't factor in. Yet I found myself securing the breathing apparatus designs with an encryption key only I could access. The mission timer on my wrist device showed that Nixala should have reached the data core by now. I activated the disruption sequence and prepared to exit the security center. "Rook," Nixala's voice came through the communication device, unnaturally tense. "I've accessed the central database." "Good. You have approximately 15 minutes before systems reset. The conspiracy is more extensive than we believed. There's evidence of involvement at the highest levels of both governments." I moved through the service corridor, heading toward our rendezvous point. "Can you download the evidence already in progress?" "But Rook," she paused. "There's something else." "What is it?" I accessed personnel files related to the weapons development. The neural interface technology has a specific developer signature. A collective military scientist who designed the initial neural suppression technology 7 years ago. Something in her voice made me stop moving. Nix, we don't have time for this. Complete the download and head to the rendezvous point. The developer was you, Rook. The words hit me like a physical blow. I leaned against the corridor wall, memories I'd tried to bury resurging with painful clarity. My neural connection accidentally interfaced with the facility's personnel database, she continued, her voice coldly professional now. I saw everything. You developed weapons specifically designed to target astral neural functions, weapons that killed hundreds of my people during the border conflicts. I closed my eyes briefly. Nix, it's complicated. You were a collective weapons designer. The accusation hung between us. You created the very technology this conspiracy is now exploiting. Before I could respond, facility alarms blared to life. Red emergency lights flashed throughout the corridor. Security breach detected in data core access. All personnel initiate containment protocols. They've detected you, I said urgently. Is the download complete? Silence answered me. For several seconds. Finally, download complete. Proceeding to rendezvous point. Nix, whatever you saw, focus on the mission, Mercer. The use of my surname wasn't lost on me. We'll discuss your deception if we survive. As I rushed toward our meeting point, the weight of the past I'd tried to escape pressed down on me. The weapons I'd designed years ago had come back to haunt me, threatening to destroy the unexpected trust that had formed between us. Security personnel flooded the corridors, their movements coordinated and professional, far more disciplined than standard corporate security. I ducked into a maintenance shaft as a squad passed, their weapons drawn and ready. The breathing apparatus schematics felt heavy in my pocket. A potential peace offering, or perhaps just another reason for her to distrust me. Either way, our mission had just become significantly more complicated. The security vessel's plasma blast grazed our port stabilizer, sending my ship into a wild spin. I fought the controls, wrestling us back to a semi-stable flight path as crystalline asteroids hung dangerously close on all sides. 3 pursuit craft, closing from Sector 7, Nixala reported, her voice cold and clinical. The warmth that had developed between us over the past weeks had vanished the moment she discovered my past. I pushed the engines harder, diving between 2 massive crystal formations in the nebula's ambient light. We can lose them in the shatter belt, I said, referring to the notorious region ahead where crystalline asteroids collided continuously. Only the most desperate pilots entered willingly. Nixala didn't respond. Her skin had maintained a steady cold blue since our escape from the facility. No flickers of gold, no ripples of violet. Nothing that betrayed any emotion beyond remote professionalism. The neural interface weapons they're developing. I started, knowing we needed to address the truth hanging between us. They're based on my original designs. But focus on piloting. She cut me off. Survival first, explanations later. Another blast from our pursuers struck closer, rattling the hull. I banked hard, weaving through an increasingly dense field of crystal shards that refracted the nebula's light in blinding patterns. The shatter belt lived up to its reputation as we penetrated deeper. Massive crystal formations drifted in seemingly random patterns, occasionally colliding with explosive force that sent deadly shards in all directions. The navigation computer struggled to map safe passages that disappeared almost as quickly as they formed. One of the pursuit vessels attempted to follow our path and collided with a suddenly moving crystal formation. The explosion briefly illuminated the surrounding space, sending a cascade of crystalline debris toward the remaining pursuers. They fell back, unwilling to risk the same fate. They're retreating, Nixala confirmed, studying the sensor readings. Temporary advantage only. They'll establish a perimeter outside the belt. I allowed myself a moment's relief before a proximity alarm blared. A massive crystal formation had appeared directly in our path, invisible until now due to its perfect refraction of surrounding light. I yanked the controls, but too late. The impact shook the entire ship. Warning lights flashed across every console as we tumbled through space, systems failing in rapid succession. Primary power core destabilizing. Nixala reported, fingers flying across the emergency systems panel. Hull breach in cargo section, atmospheric loss in 3 sections. I activated emergency containment protocols, sealing compromised areas as I fought to regain control of the crippled ship. Through the view screen I caught sight of something that might save us, a massive hollowed asteroid on the belt's periphery. Karani outpost, I said, directing our faltering trajectory toward it. Mining colony. Not the friendliest place, but they have repair facilities. Can we make it? For the first time since the facility, something besides cold efficiency colored her voice. We don't have a choice. I nursed what remained of our propulsion system, guiding us toward the massive docking bays carved into the asteroid's surface. The communications system sputtered as I transmitted an emergency landing request. A gruff voice responded through static. Unidentified vessel, you're coming in hot. Docking Bay 4 is clear for emergency landing. Payment expected regardless of your condition upon arrival. Charming, I muttered, focusing on keeping us in one piece long enough to reach the designated bay. We hit the landing pad harder than I'd intended, skidding across the surface until emergency barriers stopped our momentum. The ship groaned ominously as systems continued to fail, but we were down. The relative safety of landing allowed the confrontation we'd been delaying to finally erupt. You developed weapons specifically designed to target astral neural systems, Nixala said, turning to face me fully. Her skin pulsed between blue and angry red. Weapons that killed hundreds of my people. I unstrapped from the pilot's seat. Yes, 7 years ago I designed neural interface technology for the collective military. You told me you were a salvager. I am now, I said. After I saw how they weaponized my research, I destroyed my lab and fled with whatever data I could carry. Her eyes narrowed, the swirling silver patterns contracting. You expect me to believe you developed conscience after creating weapons of neural destruction. I didn't design them as weapons, I snapped, frustration breaking through. I developed interface technology for medical applications, neural reconstruction for trauma victims. The military division modified my work. Yet you served the collective military. As a civilian contractor, when I realized what they'd done with my research, I sabotaged the weapons program and deserted. I ran a hand through my hair. They've been hunting me ever since. Why do you think I live as a salvager in neutral territories? The emergency lighting bathed the cockpit in red as she absorbed this. And you? I countered, suddenly tired of being the only one with secrets exposed. You accessed personnel records at the facility. I saw your reaction when you found your own file. Her skin darkened, neural tendrils twitching with discomfort. Irrelevant to our current situation, not if your noble family connections compromise our mission. I pressed. The files indicated political connections at the highest levels of astral government. Connections you've never mentioned. My lineage is not your concern. It is if it affects whether anyone will believe the evidence we've stolen, I argued. If your family has interests in maintaining conflict, my family has dedicated generations to diplomatic service, she hissed, skin flashing crimson, which is precisely why I chose military intelligence instead, to avoid accusations of political favoritism. The ship shuddered around us, a reminder of our precarious situation. We can continue this argument, I said, checking the damage reports, or we can secure repairs before those security ships figure out where we've landed. Reluctantly, she nodded. Functional strategy takes priority. We emerged from the ship to find a motley collection of repair drones already scanning the damage. A heavy-set woman with cybernetic enhancements covering half her face approached, wiping grease-stained hands on her overalls. You two really know how to make an entrance, she said, eyeing our vessel critically. Hull integrity compromised in 17 locations, propulsion system fried, and she glanced at her diagnostic pad. Atmospheric regulators operating at minimum capacity. You're lucky to be breathing. Can you fix it? I asked. She snorted. Of course I can fix it. Question is whether you can pay for it. Repairs like this don't come cheap, especially with collective patrols increasing in the outer sector. I handed over a cred stick loaded with enough funds to cover standard repairs. Start with the critical systems. We need to be space-worthy as soon as possible. Aren't we all in a hurry these days? She muttered, pocketing the payment. Minimum 12 hours for essential repairs. Recommend you find accommodations in the meantime. The Rusty Nail has rooms. Tell Jorvis that Mara sent you. As she walked away, Nixala moved closer. 12 hours is problematic. The facility will have transmitted our descriptions to all outposts in the sector. Welcome to Karani, I said grimly. Nobody cares about official alerts here as long as your credits are good. But we should still maintain a low profile. We gathered what essential supplies survived the crash and made our way into the outpost proper. Karani was typical of border mining operations, a chaotic maze of corridors and chambers carved directly into the asteroid, populated by species from across the sector who preferred minimal questions about their backgrounds. The main concourse bustled with miners coming off shift, traders hawking questionable merchandise, and the usual assortment of fringe space opportunists. Nixala pulled her hood lower, concealing her distinctive features as we navigated through the crowd. The Rusty Nail proved to be a dingy establishment that functioned as a bar, hotel, and probable hub for various illegal activities. The proprietor, a grizzled Tarkasian with scarred facial tentacles, barely glanced at us as he pushed a room key across the counter. "One room left," he grunted. "Take it or leave it." I took the key without argument. Under different circumstances, sharing accommodations with Nixala might have been awkward for other reasons. Now, it was simply another tension to manage. The room was spare but relatively clean, with a single bed, basic sanitation facilities, and a small table with 2 chairs. A faded holomap of the asteroid's mining tunnels decorated one wall, likely outdated but potentially useful if we needed alternative exit routes. "We should check local communications," Nixala said, breaking the silence that had fallen between us. "There may be emergency broadcasts regarding the facility breach." I nodded, activating my portable communication device. The local network was unsecured and filled with the usual outpost chatter, trading opportunities, work contracts, entertainment options. Nothing about facility breaches or fugitives. As I scrolled through recent transmissions, a private message notification appeared on my device. Encrypted, military grade, addressed specifically to me. At the same moment, Nixala's communication device chimed with a similar alert. We exchanged glances, mutual suspicion momentarily overriding our personal conflict. "You first," I said. Her fingers moved across her device, breaking encryption patterns I recognized as Astral military code. Her expression remained neutral, but her skin betrayed her, flashing briefly with surprise before stabilizing. "Family communique," she said finally. "They've arranged extraction, diplomatic vessel, arriving within 6 hours." She paused. "For me alone," I nodded, unsurprised, and opened my own message. The Collective Intelligence Service encryption gave way to a terse offer full amnesty for past desertion, in exchange for the captured Astral intelligence officer, and all evidence gathered from the research facility. "Let me guess," Nixala said, watching my face. "Collective offering terms for my capture." "Something like that." I closed the message. "Seems we're both being offered solo tickets home." An uncomfortable silence fell between us. The divided loyalties that had temporarily receded during our mission now stood starkly exposed. "What will you do?" she asked. Finally, I shrugged. "What will you?" Neither of us answered. The truth was, I didn't know what I would do. The amnesty offer was tempting, an end to years of looking over my shoulder. But the cost, "I need something to drink," I muttered, heading for the door. "Coming?" She hesitated, then nodded. "Public spaces provide better surveillance opportunities. Just say you want a drink too," I said, attempting humor that didn't work. The bar level of the Rusty Nail was crowded with the usual assortment of miners, traders and drifters seeking temporary escape through various intoxicants. We found a corner table with good sightlines to all entrances, a security precaution we both instinctively prioritized. I ordered Terran whiskey. Nixala requested a rare Astral fermentation that the bartender surprisingly produced from beneath the counter. The clientele of Karani came from everywhere, and the establishments catered accordingly. "Your breathing apparatus," I said, noticing her slight adjustment of the device after sipping her drink. "The repairs from Crossroads are deteriorating. Functional enough," she replied, dismissively. "I have the schematics for a permanent solution," I admitted. "Downloaded from the facility. Specifications for advanced Astral-compatible respiratory technology." She looked up sharply. "You stole breathing apparatus designs during a high-security infiltration." "I saw an opportunity to help you," I said, then corrected myself. "To repay my debt. The designs incorporate collective engineering with astral neural interfaces. Properly constructed, it would allow you to function in human environments indefinitely." Her expression softened fractionally, confusion replacing anger for a moment. "Why would you?" She never finished the question. The bar's main door slammed open as 4 heavily armed figures entered, scanning the room with predatory focus. Bounty hunters, easily identified by their modified tracking visors and weapons configured for capture rather than killing. "Time to go," I said quietly, calculating the distance to the rear exit. "Too late," Nick-Salah murmured. "They've spotted us." The lead hunter, a massive bracken with reinforced body armor, pointed directly at our table. His companions immediately spread out, blocking potential escape routes. I slid my hand beneath the table, fingers closing around my concealed weapon. "Any suggestions, Commander?" For the first time since discovering my past, Nick-Salah's skin flashed with something besides anger or cold professionalism, a quick ripple of gold that signaled shared purpose. "The mining tunnel map in our room," she said. "Did you memorize the southern maintenance shaft locations? Secondary access point behind the storage units," I confirmed. 40 meters from the bar's rear exit. "On my signal." Before I could ask what signal, she raised her glass as if in a toast, then hurled it at the overhead lighting panel. The fermented astral liquid, highly reactive with certain electrical components, caused an immediate power surge. Sparks showered down as half the bar plunged into darkness. I overturned our table for cover as the bounty hunters opened fire, energy weapons scorching the wall behind us. The bar erupted into chaos, patrons diving for cover or joining the fray, seeing opportunity in the confusion. We moved in perfect synchronization toward the rear exit, covering each other in a combat pattern we'd never rehearsed but executed flawlessly. Whatever personal conflict existed between us, our professional capabilities remained seamlessly complementary. The maintenance shaft entrance was exactly where I'd remembered, hidden behind stacked storage containers. I forced the access panel open while Nick-Salah provided covering fire with a weapon she'd somehow acquired in the chaos. "Go," she urged, dropping to one knee to better target our pursuers. I slipped into the narrow shaft, pulling her in after me as a barrage of energy blasts impacted around the entrance. The panel slid shut behind us, temporarily blocking pursuit. The tunnels were dimly lit by emergency strips that cast everything in pale blue light. The air grew thinner, and carried the distinct metallic tang of mining chemicals as we moved deeper into the network of shafts. "The bracken won't fit through these maintenance tunnels," I said, ducking beneath a low-hanging conduit. "But the others will follow. Primary mining chambers ahead," Nick-Salah replied, consulting her mental map of the route. "Multiple exit options, but less cover." We emerged into a vast chamber where massive excavation equipment stood silent, temporarily abandoned between mining shifts. Crystalline formations glittered in the rock walls, remnants of the asteroid's natural state before mining operations began. As we crossed the open space, warning lights suddenly flashed throughout the chamber. A computerized voice rang out through hidden speakers. "Atmospheric contamination detected. Toxic gas release in mining sector 7. All personnel evacuate immediately. Repeat, toxic gas release detected." "Perfect timing," I muttered, spotting the telltale yellowish fog beginning to seep from ventilation shafts. "Mask up." I pulled my emergency respirator from my belt, then glanced at Nick-Salah. Her breathing apparatus was already operating at capacity to process the station's standard atmosphere. It wouldn't handle toxic mining gases. She recognized the problem simultaneously. "Proceed to the exit. I'll find an alternative route." "Like hell you will." I grabbed her arm as she turned away. My respirator can filter enough for both of us if we share. The gas concentration is too high for partial filtering, she argued, yanking free. Survival priorities dictate. Shut up about priorities, I snapped, pulling her back as the gas cloud thickened around us. I pressed my respirator firmly against her face. Breathe, now. She inhaled reluctantly, the device working to filter the toxic elements. I held my breath, calculating how long we could alternate before reaching safety. Not long enough, probably, but better than watching her suffocate. We moved as quickly as possible toward the next maintenance shaft, passing the respirator between us in a rhythmic pattern. 30 seconds for her, 20 for me. The toxic clouds grew denser, burning my eyes and exposed skin. Each time I removed the respirator to give it to Nixala, the caustic air seared my lungs. After what felt like an eternity, we reached a sealed door marked environmental control. I overrode the lock with shaking hands as my vision began to blur from gas exposure. We stumbled inside, and I slammed the panel shut behind us. Clean air flooded the chamber as emergency filtration systems activated. I collapsed against the wall, coughing violently as my body expelled the toxic particles. Through watering eyes, I saw Nixala similarly affected, though less severely thanks to the additional protection she'd received. That was, she managed between coughs, unnecessary heroics. You're welcome, I wheezed. As our breathing stabilized, I took in our surroundings. We'd found our way to an abandoned mining control room, filled with outdated equipment and monitoring stations. Emergency power kept basic systems running, including atmosphere regulation and lighting. Communications array, Nixala noted, pointing to a console in the corner. Older model, but potentially functional. I moved to examine it, professional focus momentarily overshadowing our personal tensions. Power cells depleted but not dead. If I rewrote from emergency systems, we might get enough juice for a transmission. To whom, she asked, the question hanging heavy between us. Our separate offers of extraction remained unaddressed. I turned to face her fully. We need to talk about those messages. Her skin rippled with complex patterns, uncertainty, calculation, and something less definable. Your collective handlers offered amnesty for my capture. My family arranged extraction that excluded you. This creates an obvious tactical impasse. Is that all it is to you? A tactical problem? I asked. Frustration bubbling up again. After everything we've been through, what would you have me say? That I trusted you? Her skin flushed deep red. You designed weapons that killed my people, then concealed that fact while gaining my confidence. And you concealed your political connections that could have compromised our entire mission, I countered. We've both kept secrets, not equivalent secrets. No, I agreed. But both relevant. I took a deep breath. Look, I can't change my past. I designed interfaces that were weaponized against your people. When I discovered what they'd done with my work, I destroyed as much as I could and ran. I've spent 7 years trying to atone for that mistake. Her expression remained guarded, but her skin had stabilized to a more neutral blue. Why risk your life to share your respirator? The tactical choice would have been self-preservation. Because some things matter more than tactical choices. I held her gaze steadily. Because you matter more. The admission hung in the air between us, unexpected even to myself. Her neural tendrils gently undulated, processing my words in that uniquely astral way I'd come to find fascinating. I believed my family supported peaceful resolution, she said finally. The extraction offer specifying your exclusion suggests otherwise. It appears we have both been used as pawns in a larger conflict. I nodded slowly. The separate extraction offers, the way both governments immediately knew where to contact us. None of that happens without coordination. Someone wants us separated, she concluded, moving closer to the communications console. Which means together we represent a threat. To whoever profits from continued conflict between our peoples. I joined her at the console, our shoulders nearly touching as we examined the aged technology. Like a corporate entity developing weapons to sell to both sides. Helix Corporation, she said, naming the shadow company behind the research facility. Their financial records from the facility data indicated significant investments in war material production, and influential investors from both collective and Astral governments, I added, recalling details from the stolen files. They're playing both sides. Working together, we managed to reroute power to the communications array. The system buzzed to life, old circuitry protesting but functional. We can't contact either government directly, I said, programming the transmission coordinates. They're compromised, but we can broadcast the evidence to public channels simultaneously. A data burst to multiple frequencies, Nixala agreed, her fingers dancing across the archaic interface with surprising skill. It will reach independent news networks on both sides before it can be intercepted. As we worked side by side, we weren't fully reconciled, but we were aligned in purpose once more. Transmission ready, she announced. Compressed data package includes all facility files, corporate financial records, and both our extraction offers as evidence of governmental collusion. I nodded, finger hovering over the activation control. Once we send this, there's no going back. Both our governments will consider us traitors. Her hand moved to cover mine on the console, the first intentional physical contact since her discovery of my past. Perhaps. Or we become catalysts for necessary change. Her skin rippled with a complex pattern I hadn't seen before, determination threaded with something that might have been hope. Together? I asked. The silver patterns in her eyes expanded slightly as she nodded. Together, we pressed the activation controls simultaneously. The ancient transmitter shuddered as it pushed our message outward, broadcasting evidence of corruption and conspiracy to anyone who would listen. Whatever came next, we would face it together. 3 months later, the Vortex Nebula swirled outside the viewport. I adjusted the final calibration on Nixala's new breathing apparatus, a sleek device that incorporated the best of both our technologies. The lab around us ran with equipment salvaged from our adventures and upgraded with parts from both civilizations. Try it now, I said, offering the finished device. Nixala took it, her skin changing to that particular shade of blue-violet that indicated scientific curiosity. In the 3 months since we'd broadcast the evidence of the conspiracy, I'd become fluent in the subtle language of her color changes. The neural interface is responsive, she noted, examining the connection points. You've integrated the astral biocircuitry perfectly with collective engineering. Had a good teacher. I gestured to the neural connection diagrams she'd helped create. The hybrid design should allow you to breathe normally in any atmosphere from here to Earth. She attached the device, her neural tendrils extending to interface with the connection points. The apparatus started working, glowing softly along its contours as it synchronized with her physiology. For a moment she stood absolutely still, eyes closed in concentration. Then she took a deep breath, fuller than I'd ever seen her manage in our shared atmosphere. The neural calibration is her skin rippled with golden waves. Perfect. I grinned, relief washing over me. Told you we'd figure it out. Your confidence in hybrid technology was not misplaced, she conceded, the corner of her mouth lifting. Though your initial prototype nearly suffocated me. Details, I waved dismissively. The important thing is it works now. Unity Point's alert system chimed softly, drawing our attention to the main monitor. Our AI system displayed the incoming vessel information. Diplomatic shuttles on approach, she announced. Astral Sovereignty vessel from Vector 9. Terran Collective vessel from Vector 3. Estimated arrival, 17 minutes. I exchanged a look with Nixala. Ready for this. Technically, I have been prepared for diplomatic intercession since completion of my second training cycle. Her skin betrayed her with a brief flicker of uncertainty. I meant emotionally, I clarified. These are the same governments that tried to have us killed 3 months ago. The same governments that granted us diplomatic immunity when faced with evidence of corruption, she countered. The officials arriving today represent the reformist factions that gained power after the scandal. Still doesn't mean they trust us. They don't need to trust us, she said, moving toward the door. They need only trust that our interests align with peace. I followed her through Unity Point's curved corridors. Our base had once been an abandoned mining outpost. We transformed it into something unique, neither astral nor collective in design, but a fusion of both aesthetic traditions. The environmental systems maintained a careful balance comfortable for both our physiologies. As we entered the command center, the staff minus a mix of humans, astrals and other species who joined our operation, worked efficiently at their stations. Monitors displayed the approaching diplomatic vessels, now visible against the nebula's swirling backdrop. "Final security checks complete," reported Taz. His 3 eyes blinked in sequence as he reviewed the protocols. "Defense systems at optimal functioning but passive mode as requested. Maintain that status," Nixala instructed. "Our guests must feel secure while remaining protected." I examined the docking bay readouts. Environmental seals confirmed on both landing pads. "We're ready." 16 minutes later, we stood side by side in the main conference room as the airlock doors opened simultaneously on opposite sides. The timing was deliberate. Neither delegation would enter before the other, a small but important diplomatic courtesy. The Terran delegation entered first, led by Undersecretary Chen. Her gray-streaked hair was pulled back severely, her expression carefully neutral as she assessed the room. "Mr. Mercer," she acknowledged with a slight nod. "Commander Nixala." From the opposite door, the Astral delegation glided in. High Ambassador Veldar led them, his neural tendrils longer and more elaborate than Nixala's. His skin changed in formal patterns of diplomatic greeting, mostly blue with precise ripples of gold. "Commander," he addressed Nixala first, then turned to me. "Citizen Mercer, Unity Point's reputation for neutrality is appreciated." I resisted the urge to comment on how quickly criminal had transformed to citizen once our evidence had exposed their corrupt officials. Instead, I gestured to the conference table. "Welcome to the first official diplomatic exchange in the Vortex Nebula. Unity Point is honored to host representatives of both the Terran Collective and the Astral Sovereignty." The delegations settled into their positions, carefully arranged to avoid any impression of hierarchy. Nixala and I took our places at the joining point between the two sides. "Before formal negotiations begin," Nixala said, her voice carrying the precise tone of practiced diplomacy, "I suggest a brief orientation to Unity Point's facilities, particularly our security measures." "Is that necessary?" Undersecretary Chen asked with a thin smile. "Your operation has only existed for 3 months. Surely the facilities aren't so complex. 3 months is sufficient time to establish comprehensive security protocols." Ambassador Veldar interjected smoothly. "The commander's military expertise is well documented." I caught the subtle change in Nixala's skin, a flash of irritation quickly controlled. 3 months ago, I might have missed it entirely. "The orientation isn't about complexity," I said, keeping my tone casual. "It's about transparency. If something goes wrong, we want everyone to know exactly where to go and what to do." Chen's expression softened slightly. "A reasonable precaution." The next hour was spent walking both delegations through Unity Point's main facilities. I explained our hybrid technology systems while Nixala outlined the security protocols. The delegates asked pointed questions, each side clearly assessing the base's neutrality. By the time we returned to the conference room, some of the initial tension had dissipated. The diplomats took their seats with marginally less rigidity. Unity Point represents what cooperation between our peoples can achieve. Nixala began as the formal discussions opened. This base exists in a region once considered uninhabitable by both civilizations. Now it thrives through the application of complementary technologies. A compelling demonstration, Ambassador Veldar conceded. Though the question remains whether such cooperation can extend beyond unusual individual circumstances. His eyes flickered between Nixala and me, the implication clear. "With respect, Ambassador," I said, "unusual circumstances often drive innovation. 3 months ago, both your governments considered the nebula a dead zone. Now you're sitting in a fully functional base at its heart." Undersecretary Chen leaned forward. "The Terran Collective recognizes the potential benefits of a neutral zone. However, security concerns remain paramount. The recent corporate conspiracy has left many questions unanswered, such as whether all responsible parties have been identified, Ambassador Veldar added. Nixala's skin remained professionally steady as she responded. The data we provided implicated individuals from both governments. Our understanding is that internal investigations are ongoing. The discussion continued, circling through the expected diplomatic talking points. Both sides expressed cautious interest in establishing a neutral zone within the nebula while raising concerns about enforcement and sovereignty. Progress was slow but steady. Exactly as we'd anticipated. 4 hours into negotiations, we called a brief recess. The delegations retreated to their respective quarters, while Nixala and I conferred in a small adjacent room. They're more receptive than expected, I noted, pouring water from a carafe. Chen actually nodded when I mentioned joint research initiatives. Ambassador Veldar's neural patterns indicate genuine consideration rather than diplomatic posturing. Nixala accepted the glass I offered, though his concerns about security are not misplaced. You think there might still be loyalists to the old regime? She took a sip before answering. Corporate conspiracies rarely surrender completely. Helix Corporation's assets were seized, but many of its operatives escaped prosecution. We've upgraded security 3 times since establishing the base, I reminded her. If anyone tries anything, the emergency alert cut me off, sounding through the communication system with urgent pulses. Unidentified vessels approaching from Vector 7, Vera announced. 6 small craft, attack formation, defense systems engaging. I slammed my hand on the nearest communication panel. Taz, status report. Stealth craft bypassed outer sensors. Taz responded, his voice tense. Military design but non-standard markings. They're targeting our communication array and shield generators. Nixala was already moving toward the door, her skin changing to the deep purple of combat focus. Secure the diplomatic delegations. Central command now. We raced through the corridors, the base's lighting switching to emergency protocols. Unity Point had been designed with security as a priority, with redundant systems and multiple defensive layers. But a coordinated attack by military-grade vessels was beyond what we'd anticipated for today's meeting. We reached the command center, as the first impact rocked the base. The main view screen showed 6 sleek attack craft executing a coordinated assault pattern. Shield integrity at 87%, reported the human woman at the defense station. They're targeting the same sections repeatedly. They know our layout. Internal schematic access detected, added the Astral technician at the security console. Someone transmitted our defensive positions. Nixala moved to the tactical station, her neural tendrils interfacing directly with the system. Attacking vessels match modified Helix Corporation prototypes. Corporate loyalists. They waited for both delegations to be here, I realized examining the attack pattern. This isn't just an assassination attempt. It's meant to restart the conflict. The command center doors opened as both diplomatic teams entered, escorted by Taz and his security detail. What is the meaning of this? Undersecretary Chen demanded, though her voice lacked conviction as another impact shuddered through the base. We are under attack by what appear to be Helix Corporation remnants. Nixala explained calmly, still looking at the tactical display. Their target is likely both diplomatic teams. Impossible, Ambassador Veldar stated, though his skin had paled to a washed-out blue. Helix Corporation was dismantled. Its assets were seized. I corrected him, moving to the engineering station. Its people scattered. Some apparently held grudges. Another hit rocked the base, more violent than before. The lights flickered momentarily. Shield Generator 2 is failing, the defense officer reported. They've found the junction point. I examined the system readouts, identifying the vulnerability immediately. They're exploiting the power transfer conduits. The hybrid collective astral systems have a synchronization delay they're using to time their attacks. Can you correct it? Nixala asked, already adjusting defense patterns. Not remotely. The conduit regulators need manual recalibration. I grabbed a toolkit from the emergency station. I'll have to go to the junction itself. That section is exposed to potential hull breach, Taz warned, Structural integrity is already compromised. Then I'd better hurry. Nixala looked up from the tactical display, her eyes meeting mine. I'll coordinate from here, she said. Security Team Delta, accompany him. I raced through the corridors, 2 security officers following close behind. The engineering junction was located in the outer ring, where the original mining outpost connected to our newer construction. The hybrid power systems that made Unity Point unique also created vulnerabilities at these connection points. Another impact sent us staggering against the wall as we reached the junction. Warning lights flashed, indicating atmosphere thinning ahead. I sealed my emergency breather over my face. Wait here, I told the security team. If the hull breaches completely, seal the section. Sir, protocols require. New protocol. Keep breathing. I overrode the safety lock and entered the junction chamber. The damage was immediately apparent. Energy arced between conduits, the regulation system struggling to maintain synchronization between collective power technology and astral neural interfaces. The attackers had somehow identified the precise frequency to disrupt the relationship between the systems. I worked quickly, manually adjusting the regulators while rerouting power through secondary systems. Another hit rocked the section, and a warning klaxon sounded as a small breach opened in the outer hull. The atmosphere began venting slowly, me's not immediately fatal, but I'd have limited time. My communicator activated, Nixala's voice coming through clearly, despite the interference. Rook, status update. Working on it. I grunted, fingers flying over the calibration controls. They've matched their weapon frequency to the power synchronization cycle. Clever bastards. We've identified the source of the internal breach. A maintenance drone was reprogrammed to transmit security data. Corporate spies have been busy, I muttered, wincing as energy sparked from a damaged conduit. How are the shields holding? 36% and falling. 2 vessels disabled, 4 remaining. I finished recalibrating the primary junction and moved to the backup systems. I need 2 more minutes. The diplomatic delegations have been moved to the emergency shelter, she continued. Ambassador Veldar is, surprisingly calm. Nothing like an assassination attempt to bring people together. I joked, though the thinning air was making it harder to concentrate. The chamber shuddered again as another impact struck nearby. Warning indicators showed the hull breach expanding. My breather's filter was working overtime, the emergency oxygen supplement already half depleted. Hull integrity failing, I reported, forcing my fingers to continue the delicate adjustments despite the danger. But I've almost got it. Rook, her voice softened slightly. The atmospheric readings in your section are critical. Just another day at the office. I connected the final circuits, watching with satisfaction as the power conduits stabilized. Synchronization restored. There. Tell defense to reroute shield power through the secondary grid. The effect was immediate. On my portable display, I watched as Unity Point's shields flared back to life at full capacity, energy flowing smoothly through the newly calibrated systems. The attackers, who had been concentrating fire on what they thought was a vulnerable section, suddenly found themselves facing a fully operational defense system. Shields at full capacity, Nixala confirmed. Counterattack initiated. I started back toward the exit, but another violent impact threw me against the wall as a second breach opened in the hull. Warning lights flashed red as the atmosphere evacuated more rapidly. My breather's reserve indicator dropped to critical levels. Junction section losing pressure, I reported, dragging myself toward the door. Might need a rescue here. Emergency teams dispatched. 30 seconds. I reached the door only to find the impact had jammed the mechanism. The automatic emergency protocols had engaged, sealing the breached section. Safety overrides would take time I didn't have, with oxygen levels dropping rapidly. Doors sealed, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Might have to get creative. Through the small viewport, I could see the security team working frantically to override the emergency protocols. But the systems were doing exactly what they were designed to do, protecting the rest of the base from decompression. My breather gave a final warning beep and went silent, its emergency supply exhausted. I took shallow breaths of the rapidly thinning air, calculating my remaining time in seconds rather than minutes. Then, unexpectedly, the junction's secondary access panel slid open. Nixala stepped through, wearing a full environmental suit, a secondary breather in her hand. "Your tendency toward heroic self-sacrifice remains problematic," she stated calmly, fitting the breather over my face. Fresh oxygen flooded my lungs. "How did you override the lockdown?" "I didn't." She guided me toward the secondary access. "I redirected atmospheric pressure from adjacent sections to stabilize this one, then utilized the maintenance crawlway." "You risked decompression in occupied sections?" I asked, impressed despite the danger. "Calculated risk. Evacuation protocols were already in effect." Her tone was professional, but the golden ripple beneath her skin's blue base told a different story. We made it through the crawlway moments before the junction section suffered a complete hull breach. Emergency bulkheads sealed automatically behind us as we reached the secure corridor beyond. "Status?" I asked, removing the emergency breather once atmosphere normalized. "Attack neutralized," she reported. 2 enemy vessels destroyed, 3 disabled, 1 retreated. Minimal structural damage to non-critical systems. And the diplomats, unharmed, and notably impressed by Unity Point's defensive capabilities. A hint of satisfaction colored her voice, particularly the hybrid shield technology. We returned to the command center to find both diplomatic teams reviewing the battle data. Their earlier tension had been replaced by a shared focus on the attack. "The vessels have been identified as former Helix Corporation security craft," Taz was explaining. "Modified with stealth technology and registered under a shell company. Corporate loyalists," Under-Secretary Chen mused, desperate to maintain the conflict that profited them. Their tactics demonstrated intimate knowledge of both collective and astral defense systems. Ambassador Veldar noted, his skin showing thoughtful patterns, a concerning development, but one effectively countered by equally hybrid defense systems. Nixala pointed out, Unity Point's unique technology proved resilient, precisely because it incorporated both civilizations' approaches. I watched the diplomats exchange glances, sensing a shift in their attitude. "Perhaps," Under-Secretary Chen said slowly, "there is merit in exploring further cooperative technologies. For defensive purposes initially," Ambassador Veldar agreed, "but with potential for broader applications." Just like that, the negotiations shifted. What had been cautious diplomatic maneuvering transformed into genuine collaboration. The attack had demonstrated not only the threat posed by those who profited from conflict, but also the potential strength of unified response. The next 12 hours were intense but productive. Security teams secured the disabled enemy vessels while engineering crews repaired the damage to Unity Point. Meanwhile, the diplomatic teams drafted the preliminary framework for what would become the Vortex Accords, the first formal neutral zone agreement between the Terran Collective and Astral Sovereignty. By the time both delegations departed, the foundation had been laid for something unprecedented. Unity Point would serve as the administrative center for the new neutral territory, with joint research initiatives and security protocols established under our supervision. After seeing the diplomats off, Nixala and I retreated to our private quarters overlooking the nebula. The viewing window displayed the swirling gases. "They actually agreed," I said, still somewhat amazed as I reviewed the signed preliminary accords. 3 months ago they wanted us dead. Now we're administering a neutral zone. "Shared enemies create unlikely alliances," Nixala observed, removing her formal attire. As we discovered ourselves, I watched as she carefully set aside her breathing apparatus. The new one I'd designed specifically for her. Without it she could still function in our quarters, where the atmosphere was carefully calibrated for both our needs, but with limited comfort. "Speaking of unlikely," I said, approaching her slowly, "there's still one barrier we haven't fully addressed." Her skin changed with understanding patterns, neural tendrils moving gently. "Biological incompatibility." Since establishing Unity Point, our relationship had deepened beyond professional partnership, yet certain physical realities remained challenging. Human and astral physiologies weren't designed for intimate compatibility. "I've been working on something," I admitted. "Similar principles to the breathing apparatus, but for broader applications, her silver eyes widened slightly. You developed adaptive technology for physical compatibility, theoretical designs, I clarified, based on the neural interface principles and sensory translation protocols. If you're willing to help with the astral components. She moved closer, her skin changing to that particular shade of blue-violet that I'd come to recognize as scientific curiosity blended with personal interest. The neural adaptation would require significant calibration, she said, her voice taking on a softer quality than her usual precise tones. Intimate sensory translation is considerably more complex than respiratory assistance. I like challenges, I replied, reaching out to take her hand. Her skin was cooler than human temperature, but the contact sent warmth through me nonetheless. And I'm a fast learner. Evidence suggests you are adaptable, she conceded, her fingers intertwining with mine. Her skin changed to gold amide, the color of happiness in astral emotional displays. I pulled her gently closer. We've figured out everything else. Why not this? Her free hand touched my face, neural tendrils extending slightly to create that unique astral connection. Not full telepathy, but something deeper than physical contact alone. Why not indeed? She agreed, and the golden color spread across her skin as she leaned toward me. 3 weeks later, as representatives from both governments gathered in Unity Point's main conference room to sign the formal Vortex Accords, Nixala and I stood as official witnesses. The document established the nebula as neutral territory, with joint research and security operations centered at our base. This agreement represents a first step toward lasting peace, Undersecretary Chen announced to the assembled officials and media representatives. A new approach to cooperation, rather than competition. The Vortex Neutral Zone will serve as a model for future diplomatic initiatives, Ambassador Vildar added, his skin displaying formal patterns of satisfaction. As the diplomats continued their speeches, Nixala's hand found mine behind the ceremonial podium. Her skin changed with subtle golden patterns visible only to me. 3 months earlier, we had been enemies, then reluctant allies, united only by a conspiracy that threatened both our peoples. Now we stood as partners in every sense, proving that the space between worlds could be navigated with sufficient determination and creativity. The nebula swirled beyond the viewports, its colors changing in endless patterns just as Nixala's skin did when we were alone together. What had once been a barrier had become our home. Unity Point.